Hey everybody, this is another episode of On the Wheel, and I am Elissa. Thank you for joining me. I'm talking today about increasing or strengthening your child's vocabulary or just their communication skills. One way I did this with my child, my son, when he was about 2 years old, I got him into Sesame Street. And Sesame Street was a nice way to start introducing sounds and letters and just kind of getting him familiar with words, short words. Another show I like to show my son, and I am kind of like a fan of it still, is Electric Company. Electric Company was a great show because Electric Company dealt with sounds and it incorporated music. So with me being a big music head, I liked Electric Company because it kind of had a nice beat with it, and you would have like the hard E and be like E and be like soft E, so I like Electric Company. And another show that I started my son on, and you probably can look these all up on YouTube, was In Between the Lions. That was a great show because that dealt with more like stories and learning how to understand narratives and plots and finding words and definitions. So that increased vocabulary as well. But my son was also in speech therapy, and so that helped him to increase his, forming sentences and how to use the words correctly and how to enunciate certain words. My son was not able to really clearly speak until he was about, I would say, 4 or 5. So usually, of course, by the time a child is 4, they're speaking and they're probably talking a whole lot. Well, with my son at 4, though he was speaking, it was kind of like gibberish still, as if he was like maybe a toddler. And so at 4 years old, you're expecting the kid to still be able to tell you like, hey, I want a cup, or hey, I would like a glass. Or my son was not really able to form those words correctly. And so speech therapy was a great tool to help him increase his vocabulary and to understand how to use it correctly. Was because my son is on the spectrum, I knew with him having the cognitive delay that it would be hard for him when it came to language, receptive language. It's hard for him to hear it the way it's supposed to be heard. He hears the words, but he didn't quite understand what they meant in that context. And so one thing that I would do is I would help him by turning on the subtitles on the TV. And this was just another way to help him increase his spelling, ability to know and recognize words. Because I knew with reading, sometimes you see words and you may not recognize it if you see it on a paper. But you may have heard of it, but you may not recognize it if you see it. And so I would put things, the subtitles on the TV, so that way he would correlate how people use words, how it was spelled, and that way he would know, like, oh, so that's the word the, or oh, that's how you spell there, oh, that's the correct there, because there's more than one there. And we see it all the time when people are typing or writing a story and they use the wrong there instead of their jacket. They may say they are there and it's the wrong there. So putting subtitles on the TV really helped. And also, it kind of showed him bigger words too. So sometimes words were like, some words he wouldn't get. But the bigger words, it was like, oh, and then the dinosaur popped up. So he would see the word dinosaur and he would be able to, oh, so that's how it goes. Another thing I would do for my son is I would do audible books along, like, you would read it along with the person that's reading the story. I would get Audible books where he could follow along with the book, and that would also help him hear how the words were properly said and can identify the words in the story. So he was able to follow along. And a lot of times kids with ASD or slash ADHD, a lot of times it's hard for them to focus. And so sometimes having someone read it to you helps you to focus better than you trying to read it to yourself. So I would say my son is in the 7th grade, and that is still something he struggles with, is reading comprehension. And it all starts with words, formulating words and putting words together and knowing which words to use correctly and spelling the word. So a lot of times my son may try to read something, and instead of sounding out the word, he'll guess the word. So he may see the word, and it maybe, let's say it's a hard word, it might be the word barricade. He may see the word and think basement. Or he might say something like, and then the Band-Aid, or and then the, only because he sees the letter B and he sees how many letters there are, and he tries to guess that, oh, this word probably means this. This is probably what that word is saying. And he'll just say a guess word instead of sounding out a word. And so putting up subtitles on the TV helped a whole lot. Flashcards helped a whole lot. Doing games on apps. You know, I had a tablet. I would do a lot of vocabulary, a lot of like spelling games, a lot of, there was a program called ABCia, and that would have a lot of word games and spelling games and vocabulary games, and made them fun and interactive to where even though he was learning, he was having a good time doing it. And it was a challenge. So you finish this round, you go to the next round. And so it made it fun for him. In his preschool years, though, spelling, it came a little hard because it took him a while to understand the sounds of the letters and how some letters had double sounds. So like the letter C, you have a hard C and you have a soft C. And so a lot of times it would confuse him on when to use the C. Like, is it a hard C or is it a soft C? You know, so that would be confusing. A lot of times his R's would come out sounding like his W's. And it was all because of the R, and where a W is a W. And so a lot of times that would confuse his mouth and he would say the word correctly. And a lot of times using just K's, again, you got the K, it sounds like it could be a C. So a lot of times those sounds sound familiar to another sound, and it just made it difficult. So having the subtitles helped a whole lot. Having Audible books where he can read along helped a whole lot. Playing interactive games helped a whole lot. The only downfall with the interactive games is once you play these games, it's like, okay, that's great. You can play the game. Now let's use it in a sentence. Now let's put it together. Now let's be able to recognize it in something else other than this game. And that's where sometimes we would have a hard time. He could do the game great, but then we open up a book and it would be the same word. He would have a hard time because it wasn't in the same format. And so just changing the different formats, changing the different types of ways you're teaching your child with ASD or ADHD, changing the different format. Don't keep the same format. Don't just use subtitles on the TV and think that's going to teach them, because it's not. It helps, but it's not going to be the it factor. You know, you have to do multiple things in order to like get it instilled in their head. Another thing I would say that I did is just, I'm old school. When it comes to parenting, I am old school. I would print out stuff, or I would get extra sheets from the teacher, whatever they were using, and I would buy like little workbooks from Walgreens or Walmart, and I would have my child work on those workbooks at home, even in the summer, because I felt like my job as a parent is to give my child his best shot at learning. And if I was not putting all my effort into teaching my child what he could do, then I was failing as a parent. That's just my opinion. I feel that teachers are there to help, maybe even to reiterate and to teach. And a parent's job is to expound on what that teacher did in the class, but also to teach. As a parent, you're to teach as well. And so I don't put everything on the teacher, because as a mother, I feel that that's my job, is to be a teacher too. So I would teach my child at home through the Walmart books and the Kroger books and wherever I can find little workbooks. That's what I would do. I would take my child to the library. We would find little books that they were interested in. I know the library just seems so old school nowadays, because nowadays people just download things. But again, it's just changing the venue, giving my child the opportunity to know that there are other places to read other than on a device. You know, sometimes you have to take a break from the device and pick up a book, you know? And so taking my child to the library was great, because I wanted to show him, look at this place with all these books in it, you know, and you can find any book you want, you know, it's a book full of imagination if you want, you know, pictures, comics, whatever, pop-up books, whatever, you know. And so that was fun doing the library. Another thing that I would do, it may be a little corny, but another thing I would do is when I would talk, is sometimes I would spell out the words when I talk. Maybe that's doing too much, but that's what I did to try to help my child out, you know. So while they were in kindergarten or while they were in preschool, if I would see something like, hand me that ball, and I would sometimes say it slow, like ball, you know, so they would understand like that I'm trying to tell you the different letters, and like B-A-L-L, ball, you know. Or sometimes I would emphasize like, hand me that green ball. Like I wouldn't just say the ball. And I only learned that from speech therapy. Like before I wouldn't do that. I didn't do that before. But after speech therapy with my son, I was taught to expound on what it is that I'm trying to ask my child, or the things that I'm trying to praise my child for. And that taught me to be more descriptive. And so when I see certain things for my son, I might say, give me your black jacket, hand me your red jacket, you know, or hand me that blue ball over there. No, not the one over, instead of saying there, like the one to your left, the one to your right, you know, like I would use words to try to describe to him, so that way he would understand and picture in his head like, oh, green, red, left, right, like, okay, I got it. Okay, so it was just to help him out. And it's such a habit now that even though he's in junior high, I still do it because it's just out of habit. I was told by somebody that I was reading this little insert or whatever at a church, and they were saying, that was a really good reading, even though you read it to us like we were in kindergarten. It's a habit. So it's like when I read clearly, so that way I make sure that you can hear each word. And it's just come out of habit from helping my child, because he struggled with words and reading. And so that was just one way that I helped him. Another thing that I did, and maybe this is another corny thing too, I don't know, but it worked, is I would put words around my house. And I had those old school the old school mentality of putting words around the house that associated with that thing. So if it was the wall, I had the word wall on the wall. If it was door, I had the word door on the door. Sometimes I would have just letters around the house. So that way I would just walk around and I would stop and I would point to that letter. I'm like, what is this letter? And they would tell me, like, the letter D. Oh, okay, what does it sound again? Duh. Okay, cool. And we would just walk to the next one, like, oh, what's this letter? F. Okay, what's the sound for the letter F? And it was just to show that there are letters and words and sounds everywhere. And it's an important thing that you can't communicate with someone. You can't express yourself if you don't use the correct words and use them correctly. And so I know that if going in my son has a cognitive delay, then I know that one of his problems that he's going to struggle with will always be communication. Cognitive delay that deals with the brain and the way that you think and the way that you hear messages and the way that you relay messages. So if your receptive language is impaired, that's already a notch against your level against other children. So you have to work harder. I have to think ahead, and I have to do things that maybe some parents are not doing. Maybe it seems overkill to another parent, but I did those things because I wanted my child to be ahead or in what people thought that he was going to do. So that way, by the time he is in kindergarten, no, you may not be reading a novel, but you do recognize words. And now you just need help from the teacher on knowing, okay, what's a noun? What's a pronoun? But it was my job as a mom to get him to that point. I'm saying don't leave it all on the school. By the time your child is in kindergarten, your child should be already reading some words. They should be able to see the word ball and know that that's the word ball. By the time they're in kindergarten, they should see the word it and know that that's the word it. You're kindergarten. And if not, that means you're waiting until the child is in school for the teacher to do everything. And that's a lot because every child is on a different level. And so that's just my spiel on it. But that was one of the things that I did for my son when it came to communication, is find out of the box ways to help him with his vocabulary and to help him form words and to help him with his sounds. And so that way he knows how to use those words correctly, and that way he knows how what those words mean in the context of which they were being used in, and how to communicate. Once you have the correct words, you can communicate better. And a lot of times, even if I heard the word wrong, I would correct it immediately, because I'm not going to let you just keep saying the word wrong just because I don't want to hurt your feelings. No, I'm going to correct you because I want you to communicate better. And I want you to be able to know, oh, I was saying that word wrong all this time. Yes, you were. So it's my job to help my child, is to help him with his words and to make sure that he is able to communicate correctly and well and able to understand the words that he's using. And now that he's in 7th grade, it's turned up a notch even more, because now you have to write papers. So all of that work that we did in the beginning is now coming to play, because now you have to write stories and you have to write sentences and you have to write answers down, and this is all years later. So if I never started so early in the game with him, he would be a little further back, or he would have had to work harder. And that was not my job. I did not want him to have to work harder in the classroom. That the teachers are there, the speech therapist is there, but it's still my job as a parent to make sure my child is where he needs to be academically and socially, and just as a person in a whole. And I want my child to be able to communicate well. And so these were the things that I put into place for him so he can. And so hopefully the things that you heard are some things that you can take and learn from and use as well. Maybe there are some things that you probably already use, but this is just another mom sharing her experiences, the things that I use with my son who has ASD and ADHD, and they worked because he is in the 7th grade and he has a great vocabulary, I would say, for a 7th grader. He speaks well, and there are still words that he does not remember, and there are still words that he can't pronounce correctly, and that's okay, because I mean, it's all a learning thing. It's okay, but the goal is to keep doing it, to keep putting into action, and to keep coming up with new ways to help him. And that's all I can do as a parent. You know, I'm not in this by myself. That's why we have teachers. That's why I have the speech therapist. So I'm not alone, and I have help. And so you have help as well. You just have to find the help and use them. And so this is On the Wheel. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you at the next video. Much love.